Our third reading this morning is from Exodus chapter 3. Listen for God's word that is for us in this day. Moses was keeping the flock of his father-in-law Jethro, the priest of Midian. And he led his flock beyond the wilderness and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. And there the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a flame of fire out of a bush. He looked, and the bush was blazing, yet it was not consumed. Then Moses said, I must turn aside and look at this great sight and see why the bush is not burned up. When the Lord saw that he had turned aside to see, God called to him out of the bush, Moses, Moses. And he said, Here I am. And he said, Come no closer, remove the sandals from your feet, for the place where you are standing is holy ground. He said further, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. And Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look at God. Then the Lord said, I have observed the misery of my people who are in Egypt. I've heard their cry on account of their taskmasters. Indeed, I know their sufferings. And I've come down to deliver them from the Egyptians and to bring them up out of that land to a good and a broad land, a land flowing with milk and honey, to the country of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites. The cry of the Israelites has now come to me. I have also seen how the Egyptians oppressed them. So come, I will send you to Pharaoh to bring my people, the Israelites, out of Egypt. But Moses said to God, Who am I, that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt? This is the word of the Lord. After college, I was in one of the wilderness seasons of my life. I'd done temp work, I'd been a substitute teacher, and here I was in August, a year after I graduated, in the middle of the afternoon, feeling stuck, feeling useless, tired, and restless. So I was binge watching TV the old-fashioned way, flipping through channels. You actually had to flip something, and letting the hours pass. When the phone rang and interrupted my mind-numbing afternoon. So the man's voice on the other end asked for me, and I was trying to decide if I should just hang up or deal with the sales call gauntlet, when I realized that the man was not talking about selling me something or asking me for a donation. He was asking me if I was interested in teaching junior high history and Bible. Now my attention quickly clicked into focus, and I was extremely curious as to who this was and how he knew anything about me. Now Moses wasn't in a wilderness season. Moses was living in the wilderness. He'd been there for 40 years since he fled Egypt. In his youth, he'd been this prince in Egypt, but for years and years now, he'd been a shepherd, wandering around leading the sheep and searching for food and water to keep those sheep alive. When suddenly, there are these flames, and there's a bush. Now, my experience in the desert leads me not to think of flames as curious, but as a serious threat. It would make sense that his first reaction might be to quickly try and get those sheep far away from the fire as quickly as possible. Anyone see how that might be a good idea? But on this day, Moses doesn't flee. He notices something that it's unusual, and he's curious. So he turns and he goes towards these flames, wanting to understand or see a bit more. All of our scriptures this morning are full of the unexpected. And they're asking us to imagine God working in what seems to be the most unlikely way. We find God working in these unexpected places, not in a church, not in something that was already a holy site, but may become one later. And so for Moses, it's out in this wilderness. It even says beyond the wilderness. What's beyond the wilderness? And he's moving about with this sheep in what was probably a pretty normal day. For that prophet Amos, it was this royal court where he was being accused of a conspiracy. And then for the disciples, it's right where they usually were, on their boats at the local lake, trying to catch enough fish to get them what they needed for that day. For me, it happened to be a couch in the middle of the afternoon in the middle of the week. We also find God working through unexpected events. This bush that's alive with flames that is not burning, a boat that's full of fish at the very worst time of day for fishing, even an unexpected phone call that actually offered exactly what I had been praying for. For we see God give an unexpected call or invitation. For Moses, he's given this divine assignment, but not one that Moses thinks he's prepared for. He's told that God will free the people. This is wonderful news. But then Moses hears something beyond his imagination. God will do this by sending him to tell Pharaoh to let the people go. Now Amos stands there in this court, and as they try and condemn him, saying that he is there as a prophet to earn money, he goes back to his unexpected call and he says, well, I wasn't trained to be a prophet. I'm not from a family where there are prophets before me. I am one who has and still makes my living caring for livestock and being a dresser of sycamore trees. Anyone have that in their imagination? It really just means trimming the trees, but it could be so much more interesting. So those accusing him are shown just what an unexpected prophet he was. Yet God sent him, and he went. So the disciples were fishermen. We've heard this a lot. Their goal was to catch fish. And they've been working all night, and they've really caught nothing. And Jesus tells them to go out and throw those nets again. But then Jesus invites them to follow him and to be those who catch not fish, but people. So in all of these places, we find God in the midst of the unexpected. And what else do we find? We find the resistance. It's often called the prophetic protest, or the list of excuses, the moment where each one stops and says, who, me? You've got to be kidding. Moses is the classic. We stop with the very first protest he has, but there are 5. He's not giving up easily. First, he says, who am I that I should go to Pharaoh? And then he says, what if I go and tell the people the God of your ancestors has sent me? But they say, well, what is the God's name? I don't even know your name. And then he says, okay, well, if those are solved, what if I get there and they don't believe me or they don't listen to me? And then how can I be the one to speak for you? My speech is slow. Sometimes I even stutter. Then finally he comes right out and begs, and he's like, please send someone else. Yet at each of these excuses, God steps into Moses' fear and his need, and God assures him that he's the right one. He says, I'll be with you. The name you can give for me is I am who I am. I will do what I will do. I will bring signs to show the people that you are there from me. I will be the one who speaks through you. And finally, okay, your brother Aaron can go too to help. The disciples also protest. They try to explain to Jesus why it's really pointless to put these nets out again. It's the middle of the day. It's the worst time to catch fish. Yet then they're like, okay, maybe it'd just be easier to do it than to argue about it. So they go, and the nets fill so quickly and so unexpectedly that they now have what they've always worked for, the best catch they could imagine. Their boats are so full of fish, they need more people to help. Yet now, they've seen that there might be even more because they leave. It's the greatest catch of their life, and they walk away. Right then, following Jesus on this unplanned, unexpected, divine journey. These scriptures hopefully help us realize even now that all the excuses we might come up with are nothing compared to God's plan when God calls us into it. For me, every job that has really used my skills and captured my attention has come out of an unexpected moment of surprise, sort of like this serendipity moment. It's an unexpected phone call that's happened more than once, an unexpected conversation that starts to turn the direction. And most of the time this happens when I'm most mistaken, but also most sure about what's coming next. Yet there's something in that helps me know that God is at work again. Maybe because of the surprise, because of the unexpected invitation, and it feels like something a bit beyond what we might imagine we would do ourselves. We might even find ourselves wanting to say, okay, God, I appreciate the offer, but I think you've got the wrong guy. Sometimes we protest that we're not the ones to go because it's difficult to see where God is pointing. Indeed, Moses didn't think he was prepared or he should go. But who could be more prepared for what was coming next than one who'd spent 40 years in the wilderness keeping the sheep alive? What we have, hopefully, is what Moses had. That bit of curiosity that helps us turn towards this unexpected to find that God is in the midst of it. May we realize that God is able not only to turn aside, but to lead us step by step to a new path. Maybe the most unexpected path, the most unexpected time, the most unexpected place, but the one where we find that God is, and God is leaving. And we have to let God lead because it is more than we can do ourselves. And that too is a part of the call. For it means we have to rely, to trust, to turn back to God at each and every moment. It ties right in with that song that had a beautiful message that Robin sang. Our own weakness, we find God's strength. Our own uncertainties, we find God's certain path. So may we be God's people. May we be those who turn aside, who notice the ones who are curious. God's wonder, invitation, call may come in the most unexpected circumstances. Don't miss it. It may be the most important part of shaping our lives. Now, to the one who by the power at work within us is able to do far more abundantly than all we could ask or imagine, to God be glory in the church and in Jesus Christ, to all generations forever and ever. Amen.
child come home. I will never let go of one of my own, and I'm safe within your arms, Lord. I've become a child again. I've come back to the source of love, where healing can begin. Though the world would say I must be strong and prove my worth by what I do, I will rest